Up next, the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. After this message.
Evergreen's calling.
Now that doctors and patients have discovered the many benefits of hemp-derived CBD, Alpine Miracle's nano-emulsion CBD formula is one of the most bioavailable on the market today. It's 100% THC-free, so you can order it online anywhere in the U.S. Order yours today at alpinemiracle.com. Scientists are just beginning to understand its essential role in maintaining optimal health. Get yours today. Use the code REPORTER and receive 10% off. Don't wait. Get it now at alpinemiracle.com. And now, it's time for the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show with Snowden Bishop. Listen in as Snowden interviews cannabis industry pioneers, marijuana experts, policymakers, medical practitioners, patients, and other amazing individuals with compelling stories to share. It all happens right now. Here's the Cannabis Reporter, Snowden Bishop.
Evergreen is calling.
Welcome back to the Cannabis Reporter Radio Show. I'm Snowden Bishop, and as always, I'm grateful you're joining us today. According to statistics published in the Internal Medicine edition of the Journal of the American Medical Association, opiate overdoses claimed the lives of 38,000 Americans in 2015. That's 90 deaths every day that year. More recent research indicates that number nearly doubled, with upwards of 64,000 opiate-related deaths in 2017. While some of those were caused by illegal opiates like heroin, most were caused by legal prescription opiates like hydrocodone, morphine, and oxycodone, which are plant-based derivatives of opium. A growing number of deaths can also be attributed to the synthetic opioid drug fentanyl, which is produced in a laboratory. Even methadone, another synthetic opioid, often prescribed to help heroin addicts tolerate withdrawal, can lead to deadly consequences. By contrast, cannabis has no lethal threshold. In fact, since our bodies are equipped with an endogenous cannabinoid system, we have the innate ability to safely process any amount of cannabis, and since it's scientifically impossible to overdose on marijuana, it is far safer than any opiate on the market. Cannabis is also more effective than dangerous opiates for treating chronic pain and inflammation. Researchers are now just beginning to understand how it is far safer and more effective than methadone for also addressing addiction disorders. Ironically, cannabis remains listed among heroin and other dangerous drugs in Schedule I controlled substances, while the opiate epidemic continues to impact thousands of lives. There will come a time when our government will need to acknowledge that cannabis poses zero threat to human health or society at large. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. Prohibition causes far more harm than good. The evidence is mounting from regulation states, which have already seen dramatic decline in opiate prescriptions and dramatic drops in illicit marijuana sales, leading to criminal elements in neighborhoods. Studies indicate that opiate prescriptions have dropped as much as 25% in states where it's regulated. There are so many other beneficial attributes to cannabis and why it should be legal and how it's necessary for human health, and especially for helping people to wean themselves off of dangerous opiates, which are causing far too many deaths in our country every single day. That's the topic of our show today, and I am very happy to have with me here Dr. Ravi Chandiramani. He's a naturopathic physician and pioneer in the field of integrative addiction medicine. His unique approach to the treatment of chemical dependency and psychological disorders have been refined over a decade of direct clinical experience working with chemically dependent patients. Integrative addiction medicine effectively combines evidence-based conventional addiction medicine with the nurturing and rebuilding modalities inherent in the practice of naturopathic medicine. He's experienced a great deal of success with cannabis as a treatment option for patients who are suffering with addiction, and today dedicates a good part of his naturopathic practice to exploring treatment modalities with cannabis in that regard. Dr. Ravi, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Stone. I really appreciate the opportunity as well.
So I am really eager to start talking to you about the work that you're doing with pain management. Tell me a little bit first, though, how you came to be an advocate for cannabis in the first place.
Sure, absolutely. My journey into cannabis advocacy, I suppose, is fairly unique. I was trained as a naturopathic physician. I trained in Seattle, Washington, at the famous Bastyr University. Completed my training in 2002, and very shortly after that, was licensed in the state of Arizona as a board-certified naturopathic physician. And the very first job that I was ever presented with as an opportunity was in the world of addiction medicine. I was recruited to work at a residential treatment facility in Scottsdale, Arizona, and that was in very late 2003, and from that point forward, I've spent my entire medical career to date with working largely with the chemically dependent patient population, the vast majority of whom are also suffering from any of a number of mild to moderate co-occurring psychological disorders, and so basically I had an opportunity to create a field of medicine that I term integrative addiction medicine, or IAM. Integrative addiction medicine draws from the time-tested protocols of conventional addiction medicine and adds to that evidence-based alternative and complementary and alternative medicine modalities that are inherent to the practice of evidence-based naturopathic medicine. And in so doing, I was able to draw from the best, if you will, from both worlds in creating a field of medicine that, from my perspective, having now treated 6,000 patients over the last 15 years, produces far superior results than either system of medicine could produce on their own. And so I'm very well versed in conventional addiction medicine protocols, having detoxed patients for a very long time now. And it always struck me as somewhat problematic that the only long-term tools we had to provide patients medically were other opioids. I'm speaking specifically about individuals that are opioid dependent or diagnosed with opioid use disorder. It always struck me as somewhat counterintuitive that for these individuals that needed some long-term support, the only support that the medical system could offer them was either methadone or buprenorphine, which are opioids. So we have an individual that's been hooked on opioids, and their brain and bodies have become quite used to having regular opioids. And those individuals, when seeking professional help, are left with two options, and those are also opioids. And so it always struck me as a bit counterintuitive. And when we look at the kind of the larger patient population that seeks out professional services for substance use disorders, it always struck me as somewhat, again, kind of, not the greatest strategy to have individuals that have been using substances and quote unquote toxifying their bodies and creating kind of, increased toxic burden on their organs of elimination, like kidneys and livers and the like. And these same individuals that have been doing this to themselves for any length of time are now in a position seeking professional help. And what does the medical community offer them? That is more prescription medicines that must go through those very same and now overburdened and overtaxed organs of elimination, namely, of course, the liver and kidneys again. So, and so while, of course, I understand that there's a role for prescription medicine in the treatment of substance use disorders and co-occurring psychological disorders. From my perspective, having been trained as a naturopathic physician, it should always be paramount in medical decision making that we have individuals on as few of these things as possible at the lowest effective doses possible for the shortest period of time possible, and I think that validates and kind of recognizes the fact that they have these overtaxed systems and organs of elimination. Now, 2 years ago, approximately, I had a conventionally trained MD emergency room physician reach out to me and ask at that time what I found to be a very kind of awkward question, and she specifically asked if I had ever entertained the use of cannabis therapeutics in bringing individuals off of either prescription opioids or illicit opioids, namely heroin. And at that time I said, no, I have not. And, you know, I'm working as a licensed physician in a facility that's accredited by the Joint Commission. And so I don't know that they would, A, look very kindly on that, either the state of Arizona or the Joint Commission, and B, it's just not something that I was always taught as a physician working in addiction medicine that that the use of cannabis was kind of contraindicated because it was psychoactive in nature, and because it was psychoactive in nature, it could potentially trigger an individual's reward center in their brain in a manner that caused them to relapse on whatever their original substance of choice was. And I was always taught this early on, and it was probably because the vast majority of my mentors in addiction medicine were themselves in recovery programs and members or graduates or participants in 12-step programs. And that's kind of fairly consistent with the messaging that comes through the 12-step world. And so it was only when I was presented with an opportunity to take a look at the literature, the scientific literature, a bit more carefully, and to truly understand kind of the vast majority of, the vast variety, I would say, of products that were available to individuals in the state of Arizona and other states that had medical marijuana statutes on the books, the various routes of administration, the ability to dose fairly accurately where prior to having access to things like edibles and capsules and THC infused syrups and the like, basically you had no idea what the patient was getting, because the only way they could consume cannabis was vaping, smoking, or edibles, where they had no idea what the THC content was and what they were baking. And so from my perspective, that was a huge eye opener. Understanding that the wide world of 21st century medical marijuana was something completely different than anything that I had understood based on my limited experience, you know, as a college student. And so thus began my journey into understanding on a very first-hand, personal and professional basis with my patients in an outpatient clinic in Scottsdale that not only could cannabis therapeutics be used effectively in getting individuals off of high-dose prescription opioid medicines and or illicit opioids such as heroin, but it kind of resonated more with my own personal philosophy as a naturopathic physician, not wanting to introduce additional toxic burden onto patients who already had likely overburdened livers and kidneys. And what I quickly learned was those very same prescriptions I would typically prescribe, I would typically write conventional medicines, which could number 5, 6, or more for individuals coming off of opioids. We call them kind of collectively comfort meds. And these are legend pharmaceuticals that we've used forever